Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're about to kick off in about 10 minutes. Yeah, Joxmus, it's a repeat of yesterday's, so if you attended yesterday's, then you don't need to attend today. As long as I got screenshots of you there, then you don't need to attend today. No, I'm afraid, Smithy, that's not how it works, buddy. It'll only remove 3 penalty marks if at the start of the season you had more than 3. Yeah, no problem, Joxmus. Again, there might very well be some questions at the end that are different, so it'll be a benefit anyway. You know, I think it's always good to get a little bit of extra information. Yep, that's exactly it. 3 incident reports. Yeah, but you can use the in-game replay, and the in-game replay is much better, Smithy, in ACC than it is in Formula 1. So check that out. But if needs be, we'll just use our replays anyway, and we'll probably get a good idea. Look, incidents happen, you know, this was what, your first race in ACC? Yep, it has a way to save replay. Yep, go into your excuse me, go into your settings and your replay settings, and you'll be able to get all the info in there. So you will. There's Mr. Strikes of the Viper as well. Hello. Snuff! So, this is the MAV'S Masterclass. What we are going to do is go through some little tips and tricks that I've gained throughout my racing career to help avoid incidents. I'm not saying I'm a perfect driver, I get into incidents too, but I have lots of little tips and tricks. And the benefit to you at the end of the day is we remove 3 penalty marks, up to 3 penalty marks from your license for listening to some of these classes. So we're going to cover some of the big reasons why people get penalties in the first place. Like for example, you should be saying there are 67 freaking incidents at ACC today. How do we reduce that? What things can you do as a driver to help to reduce the number of incidents you're involved in? Yeah. Usually you can apply to the expenses for an extra 3.5 hours. Yeah, 67. It's for F1, ACC, Project Cars 2, absolutely everything. These tips can be applied across all series. They're not series specific. There's probably a couple of questions that will apply to specific series, and we'll go through that towards the end. But in general, all of these things apply across the board, just when you go out racing. Yes, that's 67 contacts resulting in 28 reports. My goodness. Le big number. Yeah, penalty record still going. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's not bad, Altosis, yeah, so there's obviously, and for the first race as well, and for such a tight circuit, the number of incidents was always going to be relatively high, but, if the average per car is low, that's not too bad. But I think it does mean we need more people on the team to go through everything. That's maybe something we need to focus on. Or everyone just needs to listen to MAV'S class. That's what it is. So, all you, Smithy. Yep, you caused everything. I mean, 28 reports doesn't mean 28 penalties. Some of them will be probably deemed racing incidents and such as well. It just means that the guys have chosen that those 28 incidents need a second look. Inverted 720, oh no. Welcome everyone, another 3 minutes before we get started. Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. When you go racing, there's always going to be some kind of incidents, aren't there? I think it wouldn't really be possible to go racing if there were 0 incidents. So, but it's all just about reducing the number as much as possible, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you make sure that you're not the one involved in the incidents? Because that is the trick. Let everyone else get the penalties. See? Big brain. Joe, do you mind throughout taking the screenshots? What I was doing in the other one is take a screenshot at the start, around about 15 minutes in and about halfway through, just in case anyone does join a little bit later. Yeah, thanks, Joe. No worries, Thunder. That's no problem at all. I know it probably benefits quite a few people to be able to get a bit of an early one in. I know 8 p.m. that time is a little bit late for quite a lot of people. So it was good having a slightly earlier slot anyway. So no problem. And I am going to record this one as well. So this one I will put up on the YouTube channel. So if there's anything you do want to go back through, then you will be able to pick up on it. If you are watching from YouTube though, and did not attend the masterclass, I'm afraid we will not be able to give you any penalty mark removals, but the information is still useful, so please do take it on board. We do have a YouTube channel, Smithy. We have a YouTube channel, we have a Twitch, we have a Facebook page, we have an X page, I think. I can't remember. Stupid X. Yes, indeed. No, Jakob, I don't think you are exactly. You know, I think just, I mean, where you are in the pack, you're always going to be in the middle of those in the middle of that traffic. So, you know, it's always going to be tricky. You know, it can sometimes be easier to drive towards the front because you're driving with other people that have a lot of racing experience and the field is a little bit thinner. You know, so it's just one of those things. But yeah, we don't use the kick yet because yeah, it looked great at the start, but it's just a bit meh. Finn. All right, everybody, let's get kicked off then. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to the second MAV class. If you have already attended, we won't be taking off any additional penalty marks, but please do feel free to listen to the information provided here because it is still a big benefit. So, let's get stuck in. So first things first, why do we give out penalties within the league system? So it's important for us to have a penalty system because if you don't, you end up with crazy open lobbies that I'm sure a lot of us have experienced before. But you know, you end up getting taken out with absolutely no repercussions for the other driver. So this is why we race in a league, because we want to make sure that someone's not just going to take us out for no reason. How do we do that? We make sure we have a penalty system. And it helps us to manage an event as well. Penalties are an integral part of league racing. Every driver at some point is going to end up getting a penalty. You know, we all make mistakes. We're all human. At some point, you're going to make contact with another car. You know, and it's not us having a go at you. If we give you a penalty, we're just saying, look, you made a mistake here. This is the reason why we think it's a mistake. And please make sure to do better. Well, yeah, okay. If you only ever race once and at the back and don't touch another car, yeah, okay. You know, if we give you a penalty, we're saying, look, you made a mistake here, and you know, this is how next time you avoid it. Because for some reason, if you are getting penalty marks or indeed just a time penalty, it's because you've done something to affect someone else's race. And that other person's enjoyment has, you know, been affected in some way, from, you know, a little bump to completely ruined because they've been DNF'd from the race because they've been stacked at a wall. A lot of us practice very hard, you know, through the week, You work really hard, you get really excited for a race, and if you get taken out on lap one, it's a horrible feeling. So that's why we hand out penalties. There are some that feel like it's a personal attack on them when they get penalties, especially whenever we stack on the extra penalty marks for lap one incidents, and so on and so forth. But that's not the intention behind it. The intention is to say, look, you need to be more careful in this situation. You weren't careful enough. You made a mistake, and it ruined someone else's night. Um, if at any point we thought something was done intentionally, you wouldn't get penalty marks. You'd be thrown out. And that's why you shouldn't feel that it is some kind of slight on you as a person if you do end up getting any penalty marks. But ultimately, it is your responsibility to minimize them. Everyone gets penalty marks at some point, but if you're consistently getting a lot, then that is something that within your driving you need to fix and you need to improve. Because if you're consistently getting them, then you're making a lot of mistakes. Either because you don't understand the rules, because you're overdriving the car, etc., etc. But let's take a look at some tips on how to reduce those penalties. So some of the big ones: make sure you're attending driver's briefing. We don't just do it for our health. We don't just do it for fun. There are big reasons why we do it. Number one, and this is why we have a strict cutoff, where if you are late by 1 second, we give you a late to briefing penalty. The reason being, we need you to be there on time so that we can start the lobby on time. If we don't have a cutoff time, then people will turn up at, for ACC 13:59 and expect to get into the race. Or for the F1, turn up at 21:59 and expect to get in and immediately start racing. But it takes time to form a lobby. It takes time to get everyone in and get all the invites out. For the F1 or for ACC, it's considerably easier. But we need you there on time. But as well as that, we need you to be there ready to listen to when the briefing starts. And the information provided is important for that event. We do, I know, repeat a lot of the same information, like be careful on lap one, don't dive bomb into turn one, but we have to repeat that every time because we still get turn one incidents, almost every week. But there is a lot of specific information as well for that particular track. Altosis today gave a brilliant briefing specifically about the Hungaroring circuit. And it gives you particular details about pit entry, pit exit, little things to watch out for. There's this curb which may, cause damage to your car or something. So there are particular things that are important, as well as weather updates, whether or not safety car is on, and stuff like that. It's very important information to know about that event. So it's important to be there, be ready to listen, and make sure you take in the information as well. It's not enough to just have things go in one ear and out the other. You need to actually be there and listening and take in the information because it is important, and it will affect the event. And show
time,
respect
right?
to staff. Sorry.
I'm on time, right?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not late.
So make sure you show respect to staff as well. We're all volunteers here. Absolutely no one gets paid to do this. Darkness gets 20 minutes of grass touching per day, but that's all. But we're all volunteers. We are giving up our time to give you a good racing experience. We do get a good racing experience as well, but we're giving up an awful lot of time. It takes hours on a Tuesday night to go through reports. It takes a lot of time to set up lobbies, to run lobbies, to enter results, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of management that goes on behind the scenes. So make sure you're respecting staff. I don't think I have a problem with. I've seen a problem with anyone here. Everyone generally is quite respectful. But this is why it's important to respect staff and always, always, always listen to instruction as well. If staff give you an instruction, it's important to follow that instruction because we're trying to get the lobby started, or or restarted if there's been a red flag, or there's something that has to be done, and we need you to be listening to us and to help us get things done so that we can get on smoothly and get on to the next, get on track, because we all want to get on track and get racing as smoothly as possible. So please do remember that. But one of the big reasons for some penalty marks last season was people consistently being late to briefing. And we gave you one chance, where it's only a 3 second time penalty. But after that, the penalty marks start ranking up because if you're being disrespectful to us by not turning up on time consistently, it's just not fair. But there's plenty of ways to avoid it as well. If you send us a message and say, hey, look, Mav, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight because, my bus is late. That's fine. We provide that ability to. It just takes a little DM or a little message in a way to say, hey guys, sorry, I'm going to be late. Okie doke. So, racecraft. This is probably the bit you want to listen to a little bit more. So let's go over, why do we talk about racecraft? So incidents ruin the enjoyment of racing for other people. If you, sorry, excuse me. That's very burpy juice. Incidents ruin the enjoyment for other people. If you dive bomb into turn one, wipe someone out, and take off their front wing or cause them 90 seconds of damage, you've ruined that person's race. Or if someone does it to you as well, then your race is ruined. And we all know how horrible that feels. I'm sure everyone at some point has been crashed into. We all know how horrible that feels. It's we want to make sure that we can, yes, race hard, but race fair. So it's important to talk about how we go racing. It's you can't just go 105% all the time, because if you do that, you're always going to be overdriving the car, and you're going to be sliding everywhere, and bumping into people. So you need to make sure that you're driving within your own limits, and knowing those limits is important. But as well as that, getting involved in those incidents, they affect your race results. So many times we see very fast people getting involved in an incident, and that drops them way down the field, and then they don't get the results that they should do. Qualifying, it's a very good skill to have, but there's no point sticking it on pole if in turn one you stack it in the wall, and then end up with absolutely massive damage. And Altosis, yes, has given us a great example there. In Bathurst, he put it on pole position, and unfortunately was involved in an incident, which meant no points. And that was on lap one. It meant then that he wasn't able to convert that really good pole position at a track he was good at into good solid points, which then affects your championship position. It means you're lower down the table than you should be. So being more careful than the drivers around you means you gain position, because everyone else crashes, you gain their position. So it's important to make sure you improve your racecraft, which is a very important skill. So, sorry, 2 seconds. Yeah, I wonder who he crashed into on there. So, a really, really big point here from last season was people braking too late. We saw a lot of incidents which were entirely preventable, of people ramming into the back of another car because they've just braked far too late. And there are quite a few of those incidents where the person blamed the car in front for brake checking. It is not brake checking. Um, yeah, Smithy. I mean, I've seen people break their equipment before and causing incidents. There was one season where a driver unfortunately wiped me out because they pressed the wrong pedal. They pressed their clutch pedal instead of their brake into turn one. So they applied zero brakes. Um, but we saw a lot of incidents last season where a lot of drivers brake too late, and they blamed the driver in front for brake checking. Brake checking is when someone brakes in the middle of a straight where you're nowhere near a braking zone with the intention of causing you damage. And that is a very, very serious incident. We would almost certainly immediately disqualify for that, and potentially even ban that driver from racing again. Um, Braking 10 meters earlier into a braking zone is not brake checking. Especially, and you'll see in some of these examples, especially if there's a different tire compound involved, if their tires are more worn, they're carrying more fuel, they're a different skill level to you. Remember, we're not all esport drivers here, as much as some people like to think they are. We're not all esport drivers here. There is a very wide skill gap from the top to the bottom, and if you're driving with someone, maybe you're out of position and you're driving with someone that potentially has a bit more of a skill gap, they're going to be braking earlier. So, when driving close to another driver, it's your responsibility to make contact. It's a very good skill in racing to drive right on someone's bumper. It applies a lot of pressure. I have a great example today of driving right on the bumper of someone for 20 minutes and did not make contact once. Um, and but you'll see one of the examples here. Um, and it meant then it applied a lot of pressure on the car in front. They started to make little mistakes and they crept in. But it is the responsibility of the driver behind to not make contact. So you have to understand where they're braking at that point. Is their tires more worn, etc., etc. And as I say, the other driver braking early is not an excuse. You caught up to them. If you've caught up to a driver, why have you caught up to him? It's probably because you're braking later. It's probably because you're carrying more speed on the apex. It's probably because you're applying the throttle earlier. It's probably because you have better tires. So if you have caught up to that driver, then you need to make sure you're adapting your driving for their driving style. Because you need to make sure you don't make contact. Plus, also note, there is a rule update for next season across all series where if someone makes contact with the rear of a car in front, whether or not it spins them out or anything, any contact with the rear of a car will be reviewed. It won't necessarily get a penalty, it might depend on the situation, but if someone is consistently bumping the car in front, even if it doesn't result in a penalty or in a spin, that will result in a penalty because it is entirely disrespectful for someone to be following behind and to bump, 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 bump. It is, yeah, all contacts are tracked, exactly. It is entirely disrespectful. It is your responsibility as the driver behind to make sure you're not making that contact, and that bumping has put off a lot of really good drivers. Because people feel like everyone else is being, you know, too aggressive, and we don't want that. We should be being respectful when we're driving out on track, so this is very important to remember. Would we penalise if, you accidentally made contact with someone and it's clear it was not, you weren't trying to bump into them to be impatient? Probably not. If someone makes contact with the rear of your car, in three consecutive corners, report it, because we will be looking at that person then, and we will be applying that penalty, because that's not acceptable. So, let's get on to the tips. How do we make sure we don't brake too late and make contact with the car in front? Brake much earlier and apply 50% brake. You've caught up to that car in front. You don't need to be braking at your very last braking point. you need to switch modes. You need to think about, right, avoiding contact is the most important right now. So brake early, lift off the throttle, brake about 50%. Then, if the driver in front, their car's getting closer because they're braking harder than you can apply more brake to avoid contact. If the other driver in front hasn't braked as early as you think, then you can let off a little bit of brake and coast into the corner more. But it means then if you give yourself that little bit of breathing room by applying 50% brake, then you can make corrections. Whereas if you leave it to the very last second, apply 100% brakes, then you realize the car in front has braked before you, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. You can't beat physics. If you're applying 100% brake already, you can't slow the car down any faster. And this is the problem. It's where generally the contact is always made after the driver behind has applied full brakes, and it's just because they've applied them too late, and the gap keeps closing, and then contact. And then it's important to make sure to pay attention to their brake points. Do you know this driver? Have you raced with them before? Do they use racing line? If they're using racing line, they're probably braking at exactly the same point each time when the racing line turns red, which may be quite a lot earlier. If they're not using the racing line, they may be someone who can change and flex depending on the situation. I myself changed my braking points depending on tire wear, fuel, where the current pace is in the stint, where someone on racing line might not have that skill. So you need to take that into consideration. Do you know if this driver is an early braker, a late braker? Can you spend a few corners behind them and learn where they're braking? And then you can form a plan of what's the best way to attack this driver. So let's take a little look at a particular example of where this is me driving here behind Harvey in Paul Ricard last season. And you'll see here that I apply those brakes nice and early at approximately 50%, and it means then I can follow the car very closely but without making contact, and allows us then to have a really good run down the main Mulsanne straight. So you see here into turn one, we're following nice and close. We'd already been catching Harvey, over the last couple of laps. So now we're trying to square up a move here, apply the brakes nice and early, about 80% there. And then we're going to roll the car in and get really close, but then apply the brakes nice and early so we don't make contact. Get right on his gearbox, apply full throttle nice and early, and then follow this car. The gap does open a little bit because I did a little bit of a mistake there. But you can see there that in this particular corner here, we've got 40% brakes on here. It's nice and early. Yeah, exactly, Alto. So you don't need to brake late to stay with someone. You've already got plenty of pace in hand to be able to stay with that person. So you can see here, I can stay very close to him by only applying 50% brake, and it means then I can roll on or roll off some brake depending on how close I am getting to his bumper. And because then we get the car rotated nicely here, we're on full throttle already at this point, and he's going a little bit wider, which then will prevent his application of throttle. So that is a really good example. I know a little flex, but why not? A good example of applying that 50% brake. And here's another really good example as well. You'll see here, this is a real example of driving stock car at Zolder. And this guy is able to make a double overtake as a result.
This is one of my most beautiful overtakes of 2022. We have two cars in front fighting each other. And when it's like that, you never have to attack, but you have to let them fight and wait for the right moment. So when we get to the braking point, I see that they are still fighting. So what do? Since the next corner is a chicane, I just lift and brake earlier so that I sacrifice the corner entry in order to exit faster. Halfway through the corner, they are still side by side. So at this point, they are forced to make slower lines. This guy is too wide and will struggle to exit the corner, while the other guy is stuck by the other car and cannot cross the line to exit faster. So at this point, I managed to cross the line, have a much better traction, and overtake two in one go.
So you see there how he was able to get a really good exit as a result of here. While these guys are still at full throttle trying to battle each other, we've already lifted off the throttle, and that allows us then to get a really nice entry into the first corner, which yes, that will lose a little bit of time to these cars ahead. But what it allows us to do is get on the par much earlier. While they're still fighting over position, we're already nearly on full throttle. And it means then we get to sail past both of these cars. So that's a really good example, especially when those two guys are fighting in front. Because you have to remember, if those two guys are fighting in front, they're focusing on each other. They're not thinking about you behind them. So you have to really allow that battle to finish, and then pick up the pieces whenever they make a mistake. Because it's bound to happen. Okay? So, here's an example of how it can go badly wrong. So, here we're at Japan. We're in the Alpha here. It is lap 1, so the entire field is all really bunched up. We're going to come down into the hairpin here. You'll see Fushi has gone a little bit wide, and that's going to compromise his exit. Mintaki then gets a good run on Fushi, but we're also going to have a really good run on her, and watch what happens. So an absolute tragedy as a result. And you'll see the reason why we got such a good run is because we are on soft tires. Fushi's on mediums. Mintaki is on hard tires. Mintaki here, she is looking at the hairpin here. She's trying to be careful. She knows she's on hard tires. She's trying to make sure she doesn't come in here and absolutely bowl everyone over. And this is a very good driver awareness from Mintaki. This driver blamed Mintaki for brake checking, but we did not accept that as brake checking. Mintaki was just being careful, and we just were not careful enough on our soft tires. This was never going to be a gap. You can see that the car is pointed here to go through these two cars, and absolutely no point is there any room to go 3 wide here. So what we should have done is let off the throttle here, let these two guys go ahead. We've got loads of gap behind us, so we don't need to worry about cars behind diving in. So we could have let off the throttle, let these two get into the hairpin. Maybe they take each other out and we get 2 free positions. But we're on soft tires. We don't need to get past at this hairpin. It's only lap 1. We've got loads of time to get past. They're going to be struggling. Yeah, of course, Banax, I can show it again. So once again, just bear in mind, Fushi's gone wide. Mintaki is on hard tires, and it is lap 1. So let's just take a look again, and we'll talk through it. So we get a good run here. We're going to follow Mintaki through, but there's no gap, and we're just going to brake too late. And unfortunately, Fushi also came away with permanent rear wing damage, which affected his whole race. This driver was able to repair their wing, but lost a lot of time because they spun out and they were on soft tires, so they completely ruined that advantage. And all it would have taken would have been a little bit of throttle off. We weren't going to make that move anyway, and we wouldn't have lost position to the cars behind. Because we had loads of a gap. So that is something to think about next time you're racing close. So, what next? So, I'm sure every single one of us here has seen this quote. Ayrton Senna, the absolutely legendary Ayrton Senna. If you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing car. Exactly, Kiri, exactly. The problem is a lot of people, when they go racing, they see it as this if gap car. And this is a major problem in real racing as well as sim racing. But I think for sim racing it is a big problem because there is no chance of injury, so you're more likely to go for some gaps. Whereas in real racing, you can tend to be a little bit more nervous, and maybe not just go if gap car. So let's take a look at what are the problems with this if gap car mentality. First of all, Senna was lying. He was protecting himself from the 1990 Japan incident. If you don't know that incident, he basically went for a gap that was never going to exist. Prost turned in, and he took both of them out of the race and won the championship as a result. He denied it at the time, and that's why he made that quote. He said, look, if you don't go for a gap, then you're not a racing driver. But a year later in 1991, he really made F-Gap car in 90s. But in 1991, he admitted he basically intentionally took Prost out of the race. He knew Prost was going to turn in, but he dove the car in there anyway. And he dove it into a gap that was never going to exist. And if you rewatch the footage, you can tell, that move was never going to be on. So that is where that quote comes from. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't take it in that context. And second of all, you can't beat physics. If you brake past your absolute last braking point, you are going to lock up and go wide. Throwing the car into a gap doesn't work because, or a gap that's never going to exist. You can't brake past your final braking point. You need to make sure you're still braking before your final braking point. So some things to consider. Have they made a mistake? And that's why they're wide, or are they just taking a late apex? There's plenty of times, and we have an example here, plenty of times where a driver is taking a late apex, and they look like they've gone wide, but then they cut back down to the apex, and the reason for that, it's a legitimate way to drive. There are some corners actually require a late apex, and it lets you get on the throttle nice and early, well before the apex, and then get really good drive out of the corner. If you just throw your car in there, you're going to catch the driver off guard while they're trying to focus on applying throttle. Am I saying never throw it in? No, of course not. But you need to consider it. Also, can they see me? All cars have blind spots. You need to make sure that the other driver can see you. The advantage we have of doing sim racing is that we all have a little thumbstick. Except Pinex. Pinex is a meme lord that doesn't have a thumbstick. We all have a little thumbstick that we can use to look around us. We have proximity arrows. We have radar in ACC. Sorry, Pinex. You don't need it because you're massively aware anyway. So we have all of those things at our disposal as well. But whenever a driver has committed to the turn-in point, they're already focusing on the apex. All of their brain power is going to, feel the grip. Am I going to make this apex? When can I apply throttle? Can I roll off the brakes now? How much trail braking should I use? How does the car feel? Is it oversteering, understeering? And if you throw your car in there, they're not going to have enough brain power to be able to react to you. Then you could end up causing an incident for no reason. And third of all, is it worth the risk? If it is final lap of the season, you have to make this overtake, otherwise you're going to lose the championship. It may be more worth the risk for sending in a little bit of a late dive, but if something happens, you have to take it on the chin. If it's lap 1 of a new season, or let's say lap 3 for DRS, it's lap 3, it's brand new season, it's round 1, you've never raced with this person before, and there's a DRS straight coming up next, and they have no battery and you've got 90%, then there's no point diving it in. Stay behind, get the DRS, use the DRS to pass them. Passing on a straight is much, much safer because the other driver has a lot more brain power to play with because they're not focused on the apex or applying throttle or trail braking. So they have a lot more brain power to look at you and go, right, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going? So it is a lot safer to do so. And plus you have that extra advantage then, to be able to overtake. So it's, consider it. Plus as well, if it's the last lap and the other driver has a 3-second time penalty and you've got none, do you need to overtake them? We're all racing drivers. We want to do it on track. Yes, of course. But if you stick it down the inside and they make a mistake and turn in on you, then they will get a penalty for it if you were okay to stick the nose in there. But that still can't give you back the lost time you get as a result. What if that wipes off your front wing? You were on for a podium, you dive the nose in, they turn in, wipes off your nose, and now you're P10. We can't give you back that P3. Whereas if you'd have sat behind them, relaxed and followed them to the line, then you'd have got P3 anyway because they fall behind you because of the time penalty. So think about that, and you need to think about your overall season and your race and that particular corner. Here is a particular example then of if gap car going wrong. We have Rajad here in the Alpha is the unfortunate party, and this car sends it in a gap that was never going to exist. And it ends up then spinning Rajad out and completely ruining his race, and it's unfair because he'd driven really, really well up to this point. It's lap 14. It's nearly halfway through the race. We're on medium tires, he's on hards, and we're going to send it in, and then it ends up in, is it Riyadh? Yeah, maybe Riyadh. This gap here was never going to exist. Riyadh is obviously going to try and make the apex here. He's taking a little bit of a late apex. So he's going a little bit wider and then cutting in. So he's focused on getting the car down to this apex, and he doesn't have enough brain power to be able to focus on this Red Bull coming behind. There is no need for this Red Bull to have done this. We're on the softer tire. We could have followed him around to the DRS zone. He was flashing already, so we could have just sat behind for a lap, built up some ERS, and then overtaken. We've got loads of laps left to be able to take the advantage, this was a really, really silly move, and unfortunately did result then in a penalty for the Red Bull. Some of you may have seen this entry vortex of danger before. And this is basically what is formed when a driver starts to turn in. So you should be thinking when you're driving behind someone, we're at the next little bit of a phase of the corner. We're past the braking point. We're trail braking down to the apex at the moment. And if that driver's eyes are already on that entry and they're committed to hitting that, they probably have very little brain power left to be able to look around them. They're not going to use their thumbstick to look around them because they're focused on that apex. So, can they see me? Are they focusing on the apex? Am I in their blind spot? If you've come in from an absolute mile back, they may very well have looked at you in the straight and thought, right, he's too far back, I'm going to turn in. If you send it from an absolute mile back, that's going to be your fault. If you've been sitting right on a rear pillar somewhere, like for example, some of us drive cockpit, some of us drive T-cam, and some of us even drive chase cam. Yes, there are chase cameras out there, but those of us that drive cockpit, it's harder to see. We have a pillar in our way, and the window it doesn't show as much as well. Our mirrors are considerably smaller, um, so it's more difficult for us to look around. If you are sitting in one of those blind spots and send it in, we're not going to see you. Is that your fault? Maybe not. But if your race gets ruined as a result, we can't give you that time back, even if you were right to make the move. So this is where then we need to think about, is it worth the risk? Again, does the car ahead have time penalties? Can you over-undercut on strategy? Are we near the pit? The TV cam. Are we near the pit window? Could I jump into the pits and get some nice, fresh, soft tires? Do some hot laps, and then you pass them in the pits. Then you don't have to worry about overtaking them on track because you can wave bye-bye as they're still on the pit limiter. Is it the RS straight coming up next? Or if you're using the Audi or BMW in ACC, you can use your top speed down the Mulsanne straight to be able to overtake them instead, because you have that little bit of an advantage. You can consider those potential options as well if you're in ACC and it's a 60-90 minute race. Consider boxing a couple of laps earlier or sometimes later. Sometimes the overcut works. Where when they box, you then put in some really fast laps so that when you pit, you come out ahead of them. So these little things all need to be running through your mind when you catch up to someone. And you should be thinking about it as you're approaching someone. Whenever you're 2-3 seconds behind, think about it. Have a look at their penalties. Have a think about your strategy. Before the race, think about, right, what happens if I get stuck in traffic? Can I change my strategy? Can I go to a two-stop? Does that work at this circuit? And think about that kind of things, those kind of things. Could you start on the harder tire compound, and then traffic is less important? You then go really, really long and get lovely, nice, new, softer compounds for the end of the race. These are all little things you can think about for being able to improve that racecraft. Now, on the flip side, it is also important, if you're the yellow car, to make sure that if the other driver has already committed on the brakes, then you can't just turn across them as if they're not there. If they've already committed to the brakes, even if they've made a dive bomb from far too far back and they are in the wrong, if you turn in and you get spun out, even if we give the red car a penalty, we still can't give you your time back. So consider leaving the space anyway. Should you do it all the time? No, probably not. Sometimes you've got to be aggressive, but again, if it's lap 3 of a big long race and you know that you can get that driver another or get a penalty for the dive bomb, why not just let them sail on through and then stick close to them? And then when they get their time penalty for the dive bomb, then you can say, yep, great, and you gain the position back. But at the very least, your race is not ruined. Yes, maybe there are times where the other driver has made a mistake, and you would be not blamed for the contact. But if you can also help by not making contact, then you save your race. And this goes for both cars right now. And then consider as well, is the other driver faster? Are they someone who is, one of the top drivers that's recovering from an early spin or a quali ban, for example? Should you let them through? Don't make it easy. You can fight for your position, but if they've already got the nose in, or if you know they're going to pass you at some point, why lose 5 seconds battling when you can follow that driver and use that driver as information to help you speed up? Maybe overall you can help them drag you close, or they can help you get closer to the car in front by pulling you along. That is something that I find very useful in ACC. I generally drive faster when I'm following someone. So if, for example, I'm going to use Usaby as an example, if he were behind me, I would consider letting him through. I wouldn't necessarily do it all the time. It depends. But I would consider letting him through because I know he's considerably faster than me, and then follow him. And it means then, okay, I'll lose position to Usaby, but I then gain on other drivers, like for example Altosis or potentially others that would be up there, and I can gain position from them. And I don't lose an absolute ton of time to Usaby, who then passes me anyway. That's a particular example. I'm not saying never fight for position. And yep, Altosis is using a perfect example there. I let Altosis by at Barcelona because he was a second faster per lap than most of the field. And what that did then, it meant I got into his slipstream and used him to pull me along. In F1, it's very powerful because you have the DRS. So why not let a faster driver through and then use that DRS to pull you along and save a ton of ERS. There you go. And then you can attack other drivers later in the race. So that's all something to consider. But the most important thing here is if you're someone who uses the racing line, we see racing line blindness a lot. You need to forget about the in-game racing line when you're in a battle scenario, because you're going to need to go wide, you're going to need to brake earlier or at different points. You need to find a different line around the corner than you normally would. Just following the racing line is going to get you in trouble. So for those couple of seconds while you're battling, forget about the racing line, just drive the car as best you can. And then once the battle is finished, then you can get back onto the racing line and follow it like a rail. We see it a lot less often from drivers that don't use racing line because generally we're able to be flexible in how we go racing or how we decide our braking points. But you do still see it, So. We're coming close to the end here, so there's not an awful lot of time left. But a couple more points to cover. Patience. Practicing patience is extremely important when we go racing. If you are consistently being really, really impatient, you're going to cause trouble. You don't need to overtake every car on every corner. It's just going to cause you chaos. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose a lot of time overall because you're going to be sending it into weird corners that cause you to lose 5 seconds whenever you could lose maybe half a second behind someone and then get past them at a really easy corner that loses you no time. So you need to consider the overall picture. Practice. Practice helps you get a good feel of when and where to attack because it helps you get a feel for different lines. Is there a different way you could go around this corner? Like, for example, that corner in Zandvoort. You can go up high and then cut down because there's that huge banking. Is there other corners you can do that around? Is there camber in a certain corner that'll help you hook the car in? Is there corners you definitely shouldn't go wide at because there's marbles out there? Excuse me. And if you go out wide, you're just going to get marbles on your tires, and that's really going to suck for everyone. Make sure you do some practice. Make sure you're doing it in a race scenario. Don't just practice in time trial. Time trial's not going to give you a good enough feel. You need to practice with high fuel load, with high tire wear, and get some practice in with other drivers. Practice battling. Be super aggressive in your practice so you get a feel of, right, that's too aggressive, or, oh no, that's okay, I can get away with that. But practice with other drivers around you. Use your teammate and get in a practice session with them. Battling costs time. Can you save ERS or tires or fuel for a late aggressive stint? Could you relax for a couple of laps and then let the other person use up all of their tire? They pit and then you go flat out for 3 laps. That may very well get you ahead of them and get you the overcut then. Plan your attack. Make it clean. It's important for you to make sure that you make the overtake nice and clean. See where the driver ahead makes mistakes. Apply pressure. Yes, drive close to them, but brake early to make sure that you're not making contact. You want to drive as close to their bumper as you can, but don't touch them. And that will then start to apply more mistakes. You'll start to see they'll go wide at certain corners. If they go off onto the gravel, then you can just wave bye-bye as you go past, because they're going to be really slow and they can't affect you. If someone is understeering wide and you go down the inside, then they can't make any kind of mistake to crash into you because they're understeering. So all they're going to do is be able to disappear away from you. So that is a really good point at which to attack, because then you're not leaving your race in their hands. Because ultimately, if you end up side by side with someone, if it's up to them whether or not to turn in, then you're leaving your race in their hands. And they can completely ruin your day, even if you were correct to do so and they make the mistake. Their penalty is not going to give you back the time that was lost as a result of the contact. Consider strategy. Pit for new tires, undercut, overcut. Think about those kind of things. So, in summary, make sure you're getting out there and doing as much practice as you can. I cannot stress how much practice really, really, helps you improve. But make sure you're practicing in race scenarios. Drive at 80% pace. Get a real good feel for the track and what kind of lines you can take. Then push it to 85%, and then 90%, and then 95%. And then that's probably where you would stop. In a race scenario, you probably drive at about 95%. In a race scenario, for the most part, there's no point in driving at 100% all the time. You're just going to end up making mistakes. So learn to drive at 95%. Get into a comfortable pace, a comfortable rhythm, and be able to push when you need to push, but also be able to back off when there's a huge gap behind you and you don't really need to push anymore. And then you can reduce the number of mistakes you make. Attend the briefing. Listen, learn. There's important information there, and if you don't go to the briefings or don't tell us you can't make the briefing, you're just going to rack up penalties for no reason. It is the easiest penalty to avoid, because all it takes is a little message or to be on early. That's all it is. Patience. Plan your attack. Consider strategy. Is there another way I could get past this driver? Dive bombing into turn 1 is not the only way to make an overtake. Avoid contact. Make sure you're braking early. That then means you can apply throttle early because you've got the car rotated around the corner, and that'll benefit you all the way down the straight. Avoid racing line blindness. Make sure you forget about that racing line when you're side by side. Can the other car see me? Are they able to concentrate enough to be able to know that I'm there? If the other car doesn't know that you're there, they're just going to crash into you. That may be their mistake, but again, we can't give you any time back if you end up getting into a collision. So, that's not bad. That's 5 minutes earlier than yesterday. So, does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to pop them into the main stage here, and we will answer them as best we can. And please, no question is silly. Absolutely every question will be answered. Please don't feel free, or please don't feel silly asking any questions. It's better to get it out in the air and make sure you know how to go racing, rather to sit there and think, oh, this is silly asking this question, because I'd be willing to bet you, number one, I won't think it's silly. Number two, there's probably someone else sitting thinking, I really want to ask this question. Darkness, see if you ask a silly question. Okay, Darkness can ask silly questions. Okay, that is a very silly question. Nobody can prove I rigged anything.
People could play the card that you rigged it in your favor. So
I'm
gonna rig it in my favor.
Well, if anyone can complain, it's JP. But then I gave it to him, and he's what? I didn't do anything.
Uh-huh. Jakob, that's 19. Yeah,
Big brain. Quick math.
I'm up with the memes.
Quick math.
Welcome.
Yeah, that might actually get you up to also user base speed then, Altosis. If you
No,
did
that'll
that.
get him up to my speed.
Ha! Yeah, just drop an empty rocket booster to your car. How does one grip? Yeah,
Super
good
glue on the
question.
tires.
I could do with the answer to that, please. Oh dear. Yeah, I think we could all do with
I
the
want it.
Mercedes engine they used in Brazil, to be quite honest. You
Can
know.
I have the Mercedes car they used
Yeah,
in
and
Brazil?
Jakob,
Just to
yes,
drive
you
around
need
with
to
it.
learn how to fuel. You just need to fill your tank, mate. uh, uh, yeah, I mean, sometimes there is a case where strategy's not an option. You know, you've already pit, it's coming towards the end of the race. Um, Sometimes you just have to settle for position. Um, Sometimes, like I was in a battle there today, 20 minutes I followed the driver ahead. I was faster, but I couldn't get past because they drove a really good race. Sometimes you just have to settle for the fact that they beat you on the day. But if you take that result, it's better to get a good solid P5 than to ruin yours and someone else's race and get P10, because it means then in the overall season you do better. Um, but sometimes you have to just accept that you weren't able to get the overtake done, and the other driver just was better on the day. Good but cheap pedals? That's a good question. G29 ones, I think would be alright. So Altosis asks, how late is too late for a dive bomb where you cross the line from allowed to illegal? Generally, I know Altosis, you know this, so I'll answer for everyone else. Generally, once we get to the turn-in point, if you are not alongside before the turn-in point, then it turns into a dive bomb. As well as that, if you go so wide that would leave zero space for the other car on track, then that's a dive bomb. You need to make sure when you are braking late into a corner, you're still able to get the car stopped, turned in, and leave space on the outside. So if you go massively wide and go off track, that's a dive bomb. Make sure you're still braking before your absolute last braking point. Um, but yeah, so Finn, very good question. How do I learn not to feel pressured when someone is lapping me or is clearly faster than me? I mean, pressure is part of racing. I think practicing more will help you feel more confident in your car and what your car can do and what your skill is. So that when the driver behind approaches you, you know how there's a lot of um, brain capacity then freed up for thinking about the other driver because you're driving almost automatically. But ultimately, there's nothing really to do. You know, you can't just make the pressure disappear. What I would say is if someone's lapping you, make sure you have a good idea around the circuit of really good points to let someone past, so that you can get out of the way, let off the throttle, let the other driver pass, and then follow them. Because otherwise, you're just going to panic. Make sure you're watching that driver as they approach as well. One good thing in ACC, in the MFD, you can change the MFD in the bottom left corner to relative positioning, and it'll show little blue numbers for all the cars behind you, and you'll be able to see, is someone approaching me? Is it a leader? Is it someone for position? And that helps you then make the decision: should I pull over? Should I fight for this position, etc., etc. So that certainly helps a lot as well. And Altosa's making an absolutely brilliant point. The other car doesn't disappear once you're at the apex. You need to realize that other car deserves space on track. You can't just drive through them. What to do when the driver in front keeps blocking you from overtaking? It depends. If it is illegal blocking, then there's probably not really much you can do. Um, Other than trying to find another way past, especially using strategy or DRS, etc., etc., etc. If that's not available, you might just have to sit behind and wait for them to get a penalty. Just because they're doing something illegal doesn't mean you can do something dangerous or illegal. I know that's not what you're asking, Thunder, but it's something that you need to make sure you're not letting your impatience get to you, even if the other driver is doing something dumb or illegal. But if they're doing something dumb or illegal, you'll get the position anyway. You know. Yeah, darkness. So if you miss the braking zone, accidentally dive bomb them and pull it off successfully, that happens. We've seen it before. I've done it myself. Altosis does it all the time. Um, if you leave plenty of room on the outside of the track and don't make contact, then it's a legitimate pass. If it gets pulled off successfully, even if it is accidental, but you should always be striving to make sure you're in control of your car at all time. Otherwise, there will be times where you will just brake far too late and you'll end up running the other car off the road. Um, no, Panax, it's not. Because if something like the 1990 Japan Senna happened, and it was a title decider, we would probably then exclude the driver that caused the incident, because that's not how you go about winning a season. So certainly it's not a silly question. So Panax is basically asking, what if someone intentionally takes someone out so they win the championship? If they do that, and we can be sure that it was intentional, we would then exclude them, as in delete all points. Basically, like 1997 Schumacher, is what we would do. Anyone that doesn't know that, Schumacher intentionally crashed into Jacques Villeneuve, and as a result, he was disqualified from the entire championship. We would most likely apply that. But it depends. Obviously, it would have to be clearly intentional. Yeah, Joximus, if they're not lapping you, but obviously quicker, fight for it. Feel free to fight for it, but you have to bear in mind that if you do fight for it, you'll probably lose an awful lot of time. So maybe it is better. Like, for example, if Yuzubi was coming up behind you, because he was recovering from an early spin, it's probably better to let Yuzubi pass, because he's going to get past you no matter what. But if you battle him, it's going to cost both of you 5 seconds. Whereas if you let him pass by pulling over, letting off the throttle, it's going to cost you half a second, but you can then follow him and gain 3 seconds. So it's all about thinking about the big picture. But do you have to jump out of the way if it's for position? No, of course not. We're racing. And especially if it's towards the end of the race. If USB only catches you with 3 laps to go, don't let him pass at all. Fight for it. Do everything he can now, obviously. Don't do anything illegal. Don't weave on the straight or anything stupid like that. But fight for it. Brake as late as you can and battle for it. Yeah, of course. We're racing and we all race each other. But at the same time, if he catches you on lap 3 in a 90-minute race, you probably want to let him past, because he's not the one you're fighting. You're going to be fighting other drivers. It just entirely depends on the situation. If you so Jakob asks if there's a faster driver behind you in quali, but you're a few tenths up on your lap, that is entirely up to them to make sure they leave the gap. So you are perfectly entitled, if you're on your hot lap, to keep going. If a driver catches you on their hot lap, it's because they didn't give enough space. Even if there is a 10-second difference between the drivers. Do not You do not have to give it up. You can if you want to. Don't feel like, I'm saying do not give up on your lab. You can if you want to, if you just feel like you don't want to block them. But if you are up on your delta and you really, really want to get that lap set, then it is up to you. You get to decide whether or not you complete that lap or not. If you do invalidate it though, then do pull off to the side, because that's not fair. If you've already invalidated, then it's not going to be a valid lap. And yeah, Joe already answered that. Yeah. Okay. Joe, did you get plenty of screenshots throughout there? Yep, the ICC rulebook has an excellent section on that. What?
You said he's taking screenshots. Joe's paparazzi.
Joe's my paparazzi, yeah.
You're not that famous. Safety cars don't get that famous.
Hey.
I mean, did you get a podium?
No, I didn't.
Right, safety cars can't get podiums.
Should add P4 today though. But
I won the race,
the
right?
BAM was just.
I qualified
yes.
P40.
Yes, it's like
no,
golf.
You
want
P36,
the other way.
I finished P40.
It's like golf. You want to finish as far behind as possible. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like
Okay,
football. The bigger the number, better you are.
Does anyone else have any Yeah, exactly. Does anyone else have any further questions? Yeah, so Kiri, that's a very, very good point. If it is fully caused by a technical malfunction, what we would probably do is apply the time penalty, but not the penalty marks. Because I think there has to be generally some, you can't gain an advantage from it, from having your wheel disconnect. Otherwise, people will be unconnecting their wheels all the time. So in that particular race, we would apply a time penalty, so you don't gain an advantage from, for example, taking position, which may not affect you because the vast majority of the time, if it's a technical malfunction, you're going straight into the wall anyway and DNFing. But it's just to make sure that you don't gain an advantage. But the penalty marks, I don't think would be fair. But it depends on the situation. Are you able to prove that it was definitely a wheel disconnect? In one particular instance this season, we did exactly that. The driver was able to prove that their controller disconnected, which is why then they went straight on into the wall and caused an incident. So we removed the penalty marks, but we did apply the time penalty. So they did drop a few positions as a result, but I think that is pretty much fair. I think that's the best way to judge it. But at the same time, there are times where we have to apply the full penalty because we cannot be sure that it is definitely a technical malfunction, which I know can be disappointing. Especially if find right it was a disconnect, but we have to err on the side of caution, because otherwise, if you go too easy, then it entices a lot more people then to claim, oh, but my wheel disconnect, so that's why I took this guy out, when actually he was in full control. Yeah, TJ, I have my paddles, my clutch paddles. I can change them to be bound to throttle and brake, and yep, it's very easy for me to make that mistake as well. Click that instead of changing gear, and end up applying full throttle instead of full brake, or vice versa. Oh, excuse me. But generally, it's not that much of an issue, because the throttle is on the same side as shift up, which generally you're in full throttle anyway, and the brake is on the side of the shift down, which generally you're on the full brake anyway. So it generally doesn't really cause me any issues, but it happens. But again, you should be doing the absolute best you can to be in control of your car at all times. I'm going to give it another minute or two. Does anyone else have any further questions? Oh, sugar! Oh, dearie me. I'm going to be finishing this one and then starting the next one. Oh dear.
I'm gonna have to kidnap you just before you start the next
Oh
one.
no. There we go. Wind it all the way back up to
Get
the
the
top.
soundboard of that smithy. Send that over to me,
King
and
Soundboard. Yes!
I'll add it to the Phoenix server.
Great. Yes.
And I might be open to allowing the community access to only server soundboards, no external soundboards, because that can get way out of hand
Yeah.
very quickly.
Lovely.
Only if I'm feeling nice though. Only if it's a good sound clip. No pressure.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see. Any further questions? Why the races happen so early in the day? Well, for ACC, yeah, no, it can be a little bit early for the Americans. But yeah, it was the best balance between. Really has to leave over from our very early days where we had to balance between me in the UK, JP away in the Philippines, and the Americans. Over in America. So, those as you can see us all you want, but you're not gonna get in. Damn it, Molly. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I need to pop off for now before the start of the next one. So, again, thank you very much for popping in. If you were here for the whole time, or at least for the very majority of it, we will end up removing up to three penalty marks from your license, which will help you throughout the season. Okay, Lounge Darkness. Okay, bye, everyone. What up? Right. What announcements? Our announcements? Our announcements? Wabamo! League Battle 5! Right, who have we got? Bahrain roster, and then the Silverstone roster. Okay. The Rico. Oh my goodness, we got loads of people. Andy Moore. Cuba. Okay. The Wobster Boosty. Yeah. Myth, Flynn, Taylor, Arrow Smithy, Zolty, Nazar, an unknown player. Brilliant. Good beans. Yep. Yeah. 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 Um. Yes, Darkness. More finances will be updated after Masterclass. I'm working flat out through it to get that all updated, and then we're gonna have to give some kind of bonus because everyone has lost money this season, even the really well run teams and the best performing teams. So I'll need to give some bonus to everyone. We'll work out a fair bonus. Yay, right, get him signed. Whoever the last one is. Who are you looking? Yep. Nice. That's gonna be a good team, I think. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Silly Billy. Yeah, yep. Gotta just keep him on a tight leash. Lovely. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So he's been bounced around a little. So he has. Hey, excellent. Oops, I'm still recording.